A man and a woman have sex. Their child sneaks out to the window and falls to its death. Their responses to the death of the child are vastly different. The woman is hospitalized with crippling symptoms of grieving, while the man, a psychiatrist by profession, is controllingly focused on curing her condition. She wants to be given medication for her pain, but he disapproves, as he considers her state a part of a natural process. Back in their apartment, the woman tries to initiate sex, but the man rejects her, saying that this would only complicate her treatment. She blames him for not having been more present for her and the child, but he retorts that he only wanted to give her space to work on her doctoral thesis. Their experiences of the situation drift ever more apart, the woman immersed in her pain, the man preoccupied with her recovery, each viewing the other's attitude as self-serving ignorance. As the woman suffers panic attacks and bouts of self-harm, the man insists on finding out what exactly she is afraid of. After being unable to name a concrete object, she vaguely responds that the source of her fear is the woods. Determined to try exposure therapy, the man decides that they should go to their cabin in the forest, where confronting her fear might give the woman closure. This is the opening setup of Lars von Trier's Antichrist, a film about dread, difference, and destructivity. A film that undermines our benevolent vision of ourselves and makes us question the conventional morality we often cling to. At its core, however, the Antichrist is a film about the sexes. It's a psychological drama that displays the complex and elusive interactions between man and woman, how they view, attract, and distort each other, where, through one another, they find themselves, and also where they get lost. Follow us through this video as we delve into the forest of von Trier's symbols and images, and try to uncover the secrets of his spectacle. The mythological is the first and most obvious domain that we encounter in the world of Antichrist. Eden, the forest cabin that the man and woman decide to stay in, is of course a reference to the biblical Garden of Eden, a mythical paradise from which the first man and woman were cast out by God. From the start, we're led to observe their relationship through a sacred, allegorical lens. This is accentuated by the fact that they're never given names, and that no other adults' faces are shown for the entire duration of the film. Their social identities are reduced to the bare elements of the plot. The biblical background provides a terrifying intensification of their prototypical role. For us, they are the man and woman, reenacting the original antagonism between the sexes in a space beyond time, before time, so to speak. We see this in their double journey towards Eden, one imaginary and the other factual. In the initial vision, the woman is walking through the woods. The scene is dark and soundless, as if taking place in some sort of a mental underworld. Her steps are heavy and mechanical, her gaze is fixed, as if hypnotized. Through her vision, we first see the haunting duality of the mythical. Her body is pale white, both saintly and ghost-like, and yet she moves with the avid eagerness of an animal. It's as if she's not going, but returning to Eden, the primal place of origin. But this return is not only a divine, but also a savage act. On the other hand, their actual walk to Eden gives us a totally different impression. Here the woman complains of the ground burning, and hurries across the bridge to the cabin. As our Straten-McSparran writes, in Antichrist, Eden's forested boundaries are clearly signaled by burning ground, a reminder of hell. Upon entry, her feet begin to burn. It's as if the psychical event is burdening the actual one. From the perspective of the woman's vision, the woods seem almost threateningly vital. In the material domain, what she faces is not the slow underworld, but living hell. As opposed to her, the man walks through the forest calmly. He shows her that there is in fact nothing wrong with the ground. The discrepancy between the psychological threat and the external order encourages him. It proves that the danger is in fact only in our experience. But of course, this is what the woman is most afraid of, that there might not be anything out there. Furthermore, the central figures of Antichrist's mythological world are the three beggars. The crow, the deer, and the fox, symbolizing grief, pain, and despair, are characters that accompany each step of the film's unfolding. We see them as table figurines in the opening scene. Then each of them appears to the man in the woods around Eden. Finally, they all have to arrive at the cabin for the couple's fate to be decided. They are cyclical motifs, interrupting and binding the expected sequence of events, the linear passage of time. And the way they're presented tells us a lot about the nature of symbolism in Antichrist. They can firstly be understood within the artistic tradition of depicting melancholy. Dürer's Melancholia I and Lucas Cranach's Melancholia are famous examples of this tradition. And then we understand both the imagery and the ontology of melancholy. Melancholy is designed in the title and presented through conventional figures, like the dog or the hourglass. But most of all, melancholy is a specific way of looking. There is nothing inherently somber about the depicted scenes. We see their melancholy because it's for us a given. The peacocks, the spheres, and the playing children are perceived as symbols of melancholy only because that's what the painting dictates that they need to be. It's exactly their schematic and expressive randomness that completes our idea of melancholia. We see it in the singularity of each of them, and still it's none of them. It's as if the true depiction of melancholy is always connected with a certain absurd failure of its symbols. This is evident in the three beggars. From a psychological point of view, there's no reason why the crow, the deer, and the fox would symbolize grief, pain, and despair. But it's precisely this that makes them true symbols. It's as if they're invested with a repressed melancholy that haunts the man and the woman. They are the externalizations of that which can't be communicated in their actual relation. As the three beggars, they embody this poverty of meaning. They are a hole in the story that the couple tries to maintain. This is also why the three animals initially appear to the man. He's the one, from the start, who's removed himself from the symbolic plane. In his therapeutic method, he follows the physical logic of the woman's symptoms. The three beggars express the non-localized, symbolic character of the woman's suffering, the agony of transcendence. Through them we see the inverted form of the woman's ruptured bond with the dead child, as if she can only overcome the acuteness of her feeling of isolation through this symbolic investment of the animals. This is precisely what is lacking in the man, since his emotional focus is from the beginning centered on the woman. He's able to bear his loss through the reductive enjoyment in her physical symptoms. This is why, for the woman, the three beggars need to show up before the end. That's also why, for the man, even when they finally come, the event is absurd. From the start of Antichrist, we see that the main element in the man and woman's antagonism is their attitude towards nature. In the opening part, the man describes the woman's suffering as natural. It's his idea to go to Eden to confront the woman's phobia. He's the one who instructs her to immerse herself in nature, to surrender herself to its universal unity. The woman is terrified all throughout the exposure therapy. She is afraid of nature or of something within it. But why? It would be too naive to suggest that the child's death caused her to develop an enmity towards the processes of growth and procreation. It's also wrong to say that she's simply afraid of nature because it kindles in her destructive urges that she doesn't want to deal with. The man and woman's conflict in this case can rather be explained through a specific dialectic of the very concept of nature. Our modern notion of nature contains in itself two historically related aspects: the metaphysical and the ethical. The metaphysical, first conceived by Aristotle, concerns nature as physis, the inner principle of a thing, its self-generating essence. In this framework, physis is opposed to nomos, the external law, the societal character of a thing. The ethical aspect, elaborated later by Rousseau, concerns nature as the source of human purity and goodness. It's contrasted to civilization, which is the source of moral corruption and alienation. Therefore, to say that something is natural implies that it exists according to its inherent principle, and that this is something intrinsically good. This is the notion that's present in the man's attitude towards nature. For him, the natural phenomena they encounter are indifferently self-sustaining, which at the same time makes them harmless, even benevolent. He encourages the woman to surrender to Eden's surroundings, seen as one self-regulating, organic whole, encompassed by the totalizing concept of nature. Of course, it's exactly this concept that Antichrist brings into question, and it does so through its concrete content, the reality of nature. The messengers of this reality are the central symbols of the film, the three beggars. Each of the three animals appears before the man and enacts some sort of disillusionment with the natural world. The deer runs away with its stillborn fawn hanging out of it. The crow is almost killed by the man so as not to give away his hideout. The fox devours itself, ominously proclaiming, "Chaos reigns." Their messages are evident. Death doesn't spare the most innocent. We will kill if it means saving ourselves, and will destroy ourselves if it gives us satisfaction. The three beggars undermine the man's rational, therapeutic view of nature. They convey that which the woman is afraid of, but is unable to say. However, it would be completely incorrect to view the couple's contrast here as simply a darker version of the classical conflict between civilization and nature, a scenario in which the categories of reason are defeated by the dictates of instinct. Their story is also not a Jungian scheme, in which man represents the conscious, logical principle, while the woman typifies the unconscious, intuitive principle. Both of these perspectives are part of the man's attitude towards the woman, and both of them are more and more eroded with the progression of the film. The three beggars don't represent nature. The woman doesn't represent nature. The message is precisely that nature as a concept cannot be represented, since it doesn't exist. There is no universal self-renewing organism of nature. Only particular beings, the tree trunk, the bird, the falling acorn. Each of them lives of its own accord, without harmony or discord with anything else. Maintaining belief in the overarching notion of nature is the subtle way in which the man's able to delay the reality of their child's death. He's from the start preoccupied with the woman's symptoms because they are cracks in his imaginary construct of the meaningful whole. He needs to functionalize, to naturalize them as parts of an organic healing process, in which everything is necessary and nothing is lost. From the start, the woman is unwilling to accept the man's desire for this rational totality. She seems burdened by the necessity of conceiving a logical unity in the world that surrounds them. We see on her example how, once nature has been deprived of its conceptual integrity, it doesn't appear as empty materiality. On the contrary, once nature is confronted in its fragmented, decentered state, each of its parts is all the more experienced through a symbolic, fictionalized form. In this reversal, it's not the objective cruelty of nature that shakes the man's rational position, since it's exactly objectivity that his perspective is based on. What makes him more and more afraid is the disruptiveness of the three beggars. As Zolkos points out, insofar as the animals are messengers that signify knowledge inaccessible to the masculine subject, they throw the epistemological privilege of the human into question. It's as if, through the man's experience, we gradually understand that it's the cold factuality of the world that is the true fantasy, whereas the intense fiction of the talking fox reveals the reality of nature. Through this inversion, we can understand the woman's claim that nature is Satan's church. To resist the man's rationalization, it's not enough for her to express fear of the brutal fragmentation of nature, since this only justifies his objectivist position. Instead, she presents nature as an antithetical, demonic totality. Only in this way is the woman able to break the man's construct, by evoking a terrible counter-integrity, reversing the benevolent purpose of his totalization. In this view, nature doesn't center around self-renewal, but self-destruction. The deer conceives so that its fetus could die. The acorns grow and fall screaming to their demise. It's not the death of individual organisms that serves the continuation of life, but it's the continuation of life that perpetuates the death of individual organisms. By equating nature with Satan's church, nature is not only presented as cruel, but as evil. That is, its cruelty is given a symbolic, anthropomorphic face. Contrary to what we would expect, the film doesn't portray human evil as a result of the viciousness of nature. Following the mythical logic of Eden, it shows human evil as the source of nature's brutality. We can best see this in the couple's sex scene in the forest. Through the arms reaching out of the tree roots, we recognized how our lust always projects pieces of humanity inside nature. How in the sexual act it's never a matter of submitting to an organic need or impulse. How it's always something more, the pleasure of dominating our basic drives, the pleasure of subjugating nature within us through the aggression of desire. This is why, throughout the film, the woman insists on having sex, and why the man tries to resist it. Sexuality is the sacred anomaly in the rationalist, biological view of nature, since in order to be what it has to be more than what it is. From a mythical point of view, real sex can't exist in the Garden of Eden, since sexuality presupposes a transgression of natural boundaries, a disobedience toward the original order. Herein lies the repressiveness of the man's attitude. He wants to impose the benevolence of the fixed mythical structure on his relationship with the woman. He needs to naturalize her to escape the reality of pain. We finally come to the main question of Antichrist. Why does the woman turn against the man? Why does she resist his vision of nature? Why does she attack and almost kill him? The simplest answer would perhaps be acknowledgement. She rebels against him to gain recognition for her experience, or to take revenge for its lack. This is the final principle. But let's see how we arrive at it, and what it says about the meaning of the film. We can say that the death of the child is the original event only from the man's perspective. As the story progresses, we find out that the woman's depression predates their tragedy. She says how at one point she realized that everything that used to be beautiful about Eden was perhaps hideous. She hears a piercing sound of crying coming from an unknown source in the woods. We see how she gradually gives up on her doctoral thesis, her handwriting becoming more and more deranged. It's as though the child's death is just a manifestation of a change that occurred in the woman before the depicted events. It's expressed as a profound dissatisfaction, a resistance against her established role in the relational order. And this change is not just an isolated turn of character, but is fundamentally referential, bound to her relationship with the man. To begin with, it's evident that the man doesn't take the woman's perspective at face value. He affirms her experience, but denies its epistemological weight. Her feelings are understandable, but are ultimately a misunderstanding, a wrong interpretation of observable physical symptoms. This is the rift that creates the basic contradiction in her attitude towards the man. He cares for her, but doesn't regard her judgment as equal. He wants her to get better, but only through his own methods. We see the man acting from the position of the lawgiver, responsible for the meaning of totality. He has decided the character of her illness, and that they would go to the mythical space of Eden to reconnect with the healing forces of nature. The woman can choose how she'll participate in the law, but she can't overturn it. She can either be grateful for the man's support or retreat from external danger into the world of her emotions. In any case, she's designated to be dependent, partial, irrational, a negative reflection of the man's benevolent, systematizing mission. She's affirmed in her essence because this essence is pre-assigned to her. But why does the man behave this way? And what's the basis of his perspective? It's above all a dialectic of authority. We see from the beginning that his stability is grounded in an unconscious displacement. He represses the death of the child through the systematic control of the woman's body. The woman at first is incapable of this displacement. She can't remove her pain from inside herself. This is why the man dominates. He's able to deal with this pain by controlling that in which it's projected. And when this dominance is raised into the conceptual domain, it becomes authority. Through the force of objectivization, the man institutes an objective world, independent of momentary feelings and perceptions. This way he sublimates his dominating role into a higher faculty of reason. This is the crucial element of his violence. In order to be truly effective, it must seem like a natural result of a nobler instance. That is, it has to have the form of a law. But this sublimation, the woman nevertheless still feels as derivative of his domineering desire. Since the repression of pain is for her far more difficult, she's aware that it's the man's feeling of supremacy that ultimately justifies his reason, and not the other way around. This is precisely why the man is reluctant to have sex, because it lays bare the sensual source of his rationality. This is then the paradox of the man's position. He realizes his sexuality by forcing on the woman a role in his ideal order. But the more he succeeds, the more he's afraid of her reality outside of this order. This is why the theme of witchcraft is so important in the film. The woman, of course, doesn't practice any kind of actual ritual sorcery, Witchcraft is a metaphor for the woman's realized consciousness of her own subjugation, and the possibilities that come with it. For though the man believes that he controls the woman through his law-giving role, it's really his active attempt to completely integrate her that attracts her. But as he unyieldingly keeps to his law, he misses the logic of this attraction. This is the weakness that the woman's witchcraft exploits. It encompasses the magic of the irregular, the particular. It's the power that resides in the disjointed elements of the world. The crow, the oak tree, the forest snail. The concept of witchcraft is how the woman is able to perform her own displacement. Through the three beggars, she turns the symbolic reality of nature against the man's rational idea of it. During their sex scene in the woods, the woman utters, "The sisters from Ratisbon could start a hailstorm." This is the formula of the man's fear, the self-conscious community of women who manipulate the forces of nature, the moment where he becomes the object of the female power over totality. For again, witchcraft does what the factual resistance to the male reason is unable to. It creates a counter-mythology. The fact that the man doesn't believe in the three beggars makes absolutely no difference. Through them, the woman pierces the screen of his benevolent causal universe, putting him in a passive, endangered position. Of course, witchcraft can't and doesn't need to actually hurt the man. It just needs to turn the violence of his repressive mechanisms against him. But if this is so, why then does the woman also hurt her own child? And why does she finally castrate herself in the man? The answer could be that once she transgresses against the male law, she intuitively continues to the point of absolute freedom. That is, total destruction. In order to truly negate the emotional, dependent role assigned to her, she must radically surpass the man in her autonomy. She has to transcend the male violence, centered on domination or survival, and turn it into a pure instrument of self-affirmation. As J. Marso points out, female characters whose love does not take the expected form of self-abnegation or self-sacrifice, particularly when they are mothers, are generally depicted in film as freaks of nature. But free of self-victimizing love, can women in patriarchy love at all? This is one way to understand the woman's brutality. Once she refuses the roles of a caring mother and a loving wife, her greatest obstacle is still the internalized guilt before the law, manifested as radical cruelty. In this we can see the meaning of her genital mutilation. It's a form of masochistic revenge, but it's also a grotesque reenactment of the man's sublimation of his own sexuality. Through her clitorectomy, it's as though the woman shows that she too can renounce pleasure for power. And to affirm her female freedom, she's even ready to sacrifice her own womanhood. Of course, this is why the woman is ultimately unable to finish her doctoral thesis, because criticizing the historical violence only situates it in the past and mystifies her current subjugation. She resists the man's benevolent perspective because she recognizes it as an even more conceptual, arrogant form of domination. Instead, she rebels by embracing her demonization, by translating the effects of historical violence into a counter-mythology of nature and humanity. This is why the woman is the Antichrist. She repeats the biblical story of human disobedience, their exile from the ideal state of nature, but from a position of radical realism. Through her perishing, she displays how there is no such thing as a benevolent authority, and how the Garden of Eden is always sustained through unrecognized humiliation. This is why when she's finally killed by the man, we see in it the repetition of the historical antagonism between the sexes. We understand that the man doesn't actually murder her because she's evil, but simply because she endangers him. The event demonstrates how, to reveal the fundamentally physical character of man's authority, it might be necessary to die. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoy what we do, like and subscribe to be notified of upcoming releases. You'll watch the things themselves, and we'll see you somewhere in the future.